Hey Deckers, Deceit 2 is here, and a huge thanks to Evolve PR for the code to test this one out. Unfortunately, out of the gate, it doesn't start up. Well, it does start, but it crashes out to the home screen during the initial load. However, if we do switch this over to Proton Experimental, this does seem to be working just fine. Now, I did also run this under GE Proton 14, and that was also fine. Just unfortunately, the stock is not working here. It did crash out again on me on one of the initial loads for getting into one of the games, but I was able to play multiplayer games just fine. It doesn't have controller support directly, you do have to switch it over, but once you do set your controller in game, for some reason it defaulted to keyboard and mouse. On the controller set for Steam, it was just fine. So it does have full controller mapping, you just have to make sure it's set in Steam, otherwise it will confuse you somewhat. Settings wise, I did have to put this down to low on absolutely everything, with motion blur off and view distance down to near to get the best experience. With the frame rate limit at 60, you probably could cap this at 30 for a slightly more stable experience, but I did want to just show just how high or low the frames per second went during this video. So although I capped it at 60 frames per second, it does bounce between 30 and 50 quite often, with sitting around the mid 40s most of the time. It does have some huge loading spikes during some of the cutscenes and also during some of the games. During the transition of scenes, especially during voting, it really does take a hit. Using the controller can be a little bit fiddly for some of the tasks, and this does seem more like a glorified Among Us rather than the original Deceit style, as you have two enemies that attack you during the second section, but there does seem to be a lot of false accusations, and rather than accusations, people just shoot and kill you. So your game can be over very quickly if somebody decides that they don't like the look of you and just decide to shoot you outright. It can be fairly interesting to try and figure out who is the actual enemies, but people do seem to talk a lot in the game. So if you don't have a mic during your game, you're probably going to get shot very quickly because you're not taking part. Overall, it is playable on the Steam Deck, but it is a difficult game to get into. If you have played the first one, there doesn't seem to be a hugely great reception towards the second one because it's taken the gameplay leap a little bit too far, and it will take you a good 3 or 4 games to actually get the hang of things because you're likely going to die very quickly. Let us know in the comments below if you're going to be diving into Deceit 2 or whether you're going to be giving this a miss. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.
Okay, vote him, guys. Vote him. It's you.
Guys,
I swear.
I have this paper on my hand. Wait, let me read. Oh my god. Where is the other guy?
Vote him.